Welcome to Universal God, Message of Peace. And I am Lee Weissman, and that's Lale Tuncer. And we've been having dialogues every week. And our format has been to take something which is normally thought of as a virtue and something which is normally thought of as a vice, and to kind of put them side by side and to see how they relate to each other and to see if we can find some good even in those things which seem to be not so wonderful. So in this case today, we're going to be talking about selflessness and selfishness. So I'm going to take the side of selflessness, and so I'll start out since I'm already okay. So I'll start out by saying that selflessness is about as close as we can get to being like God, right? God does not need us, right? God doesn't need us. God doesn't need a world. God doesn't need anything, right? So that means that everything that God does is selfless. It has no, it has no benefit to him, no benefit to God at all. So selflessness is about as close as we can get if we want to imitate God, if we want to be like God, so to speak. Obviously, we can't really be like God, but if we want to be like God, so to speak, that's as close as we can get. So that would be my first point. And my second point is that it's so much nicer. Okay, so much nicer that when somebody comes to you, I'll give you an example. So imagine you have a pain in your back. Okay, you have a pain in your back. Actually, this happened to me. Somebody came up to me and they said to me, "Oh, my back hurts. Oh, ow, ow." And I said, uh, I had the same problem a few years ago. I had an accident and I stepped on the ice and I slipped and I fell and I messed up my disc and I had to crawl for 3 miles to the hospital, and I went to the hospital and I was down for 3 weeks and it bothered me for years, and I went into this whole story, right? Now, what's the problem there? The problem there is the person told me about their problem, and what did I do? I made it all about me, right? I made it all about me. It was like I completely ignored them almost, right? They said and I started talking about my problems, right? But how much nicer would it be if they had said, "Oh, my back hurts," and I said, "Wow, I'm so sorry your back hurts. What's it like? It must be so hard to go to work. It must be so hard to drive. It must be so hard," right? So selflessness is just so much nicer. It's so much nicer. We feel so much better when somebody attends to us and pays attention to us and doesn't always pay attention to themselves. Okay, so those are my two things so far.
Very good. Well, thank you for those points. And yes, I agree. Selflessness is beautiful, and we feel so much happier when somebody takes interest in us rather than themselves. But isn't that desire to be listened to, doesn't that come from a selfish place? And also, so it doesn't, so one could argue that actually the fact that we want to be listened to, it's a selfish desire to want to be listened to. And actually we could, maybe that person wants to talk about themselves. So if we were truly selfless, then we would allow them to talk about their back pain. And secondly, if we're completely selfless, I guess then we have no ego, we have no identity, and we could argue that we're like God, or that we are one, in that experience. But from an Abrahamic perspective, like we know from the scripture, God created us and created human beings, and we have an ego, and he obviously intended that we're not God in that sense. So he intended that actually we are created being with a separate identity, and perhaps he wants us to be in a place that's not so close that we merge into one complete oneness in our experience of reality, in order that we can have a relationship. So selfishness enables us to be able to have a relationship, and perhaps to do that is more selfless, because we're actually doing the will of God rather than our experience of oneness and complete peace, and losing ourselves in him. We could argue that that's selfish, because we're not actually doing what God wants us to do, which is to stay a little bit distant in order to experience a little bit of an ego, and experience a little bit of an identity, in order that we can bring down his light into this physical reality of this, into the darkness. And that was just one point. And I think secondly, my understanding of selfishness is that actually it sort of depends on our intention. So, and it also depends on whether it's so intentional or unintentional selfishness. So for example, a child is selfish, but they don't intend to be selfish, so they just are what they are, until they get to a point where they make a mistake and the parent tells them, well, that was wrong. And then if they do it again, then perhaps they knew it was wrong, but they did it anyway. Then we could argue that that's less forgivable or less okay. And I think all of us, we've got an element of selfishness to us that's like a child. It's like an immature awareness or level of consciousness, which is forgivable by the Creator, and actually it pleases him, because he created us like this, so he's completely okay with it, just like we are okay with our children. They're so beautiful. A baby who cries because wants his nappy changed or is hungry, it's all about the baby, but they don't really have the awareness of there being something other than themselves, because of their natural innate ego, that's how they are. So and I think sometimes we can behave in a way like that, where it's all about me, 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 but we don't intend to be, selfish, in the sense that we don't know that what we're doing is unjust. We don't know that what we're doing is upsetting somebody else, or we don't know that we don't intentionally want to take from somebody else in order to have for ourselves. So that type of selfishness, I would say, is okay and forgivable. But as soon as we start to realize what is right and what is wrong, or what pleases our Creator and what doesn't, if we intentionally choose to do the opposite, then that's arrogance. And that type of arrogance leads to a selfishness that can be very harmful and cause a lot of injustice to ourselves as well as other people, because we're willingly setting up ourselves as like a god besides the will of our Creator, because we know and we still disobey. In that sense, it's like if a revelation of truth, something we might, when we understand something to be truth, or a higher level of truth, but we willingly turn away from it because we want to follow our worldly desires, or we want the temporary pleasures of this world, and that's more important to us because it gives us more pleasure. Then we turn away from the truth. Then that's a selfishness that I would find is more is less excusable.
So
and forgivable.
I think you've actually hit. So I'm going to switch sides now, but okay, but okay, I have to be. I have to, I have to be on the side of truth. So I think you hit on something really important, and that is that um, it's hard to have selflessness if you don't have a certain degree of selfishness first. I mean, it when my daughter was a little girl, okay, so she went through the period when she was like 2 years old of going mine, right? So everything was, like mine, 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 mine. Little kids, 2-year-olds,
Yeah,
they
all
go through that
children say
mine,
that.
right? And I remember, and I think I said to her something like, no, everything, we share everything. I'm very, I'm sort of like a
Mhm,
socialist, I said, oh no, we share everything. Everything really belongs to God. And I don't know what I said.
mhm,
And a rabbi friend of mine who was there said, no, says, don't do that. He says, you should let her know that things
mhm,
are hers so that
mhm.
when she wants to give them to somebody else, she
Mhm.
gives them freely. And she
Oh,
gives them
yes.
because she can give what is hers. So she has to
Mhm,
have a sense of ownership of things, right? She has
mhm,
to have a sense that she has to have a sense that there are things in the world that are hers and that she
mhm.
can share them. Not that they never belonged to her in the first place. And
Yeah,
and I think that that's
that's beautiful. That's a great point. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
think it's very powerful,
yeah.
and And I think the same is with the ego. You can't give up an ego you
Mhm,
never had.
mhm.
And
That's true.
if you never thought of yourself as anything, then
Mhm.
what's the point of your being nothing? You can't get,
Exactly.
you
And
know?
and actually it pleases our creator so much when we can give something what we thought was ours. We have to believe it's ours in order to
Right.
sacrifice it for his cause. And that brings immense pleasure to our creator. And it's a way of showing gratitude for all the things that we've been given that we once believed to be ours. When you get to the you want you through our selfishness, we become aware of our creator, and to be grateful for that, we can then give whatever we thought was ours in order to give something back by
Yeah.
using it to help other people. And unless we have an identity through our ego, then how can we actually sacrifice? And without sacrifice, how can we learn empathy? How can we learn compassion? How can we bring down that light into a place where uh, that experience doesn't uh, exist in a revealed way?
Yeah.
We have the ability to do that. So I think it's all according to like our understanding and innocence. If we're innocent and we're naive and we don't realize, just like a child, you know
Mhm.
doesn't realize, then there's I don't think that's not their fault. That's not our fault. I don't think we can be chastised for the selfishness that is natural part of who we are. And um it in its own way, it serves the creator. And or look at animals, the way that they exist. You could say they're naturally selfish,
Yeah.
and it's all about their desires and everything, but they don't know any better.
Right.
So the problem is when we do know better, when
Right.
we do know that it's better to give rather than take,
Right.
and then we're judged according, I think, to what we know.
Yeah.
And so it's our job then to
But
go beyond that.
we know what to give though based on what we like to take. So the
Yes, exactly. That's another thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean
How
the
can we
short
even be selfless? Mm,
love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. It says love
yeah.
your neighbor. So why does it say that? Because we know
Hmm.
how we want to be loved. We know how we want to be treated, right? We understand that because we're selfish, right? I mean, we have our selfish needs. And
Hmm.
so it's saying, okay, so understand the selfish needs that you have, and assume that other people also have those selfish needs.
Exactly. That's it.
Provide for them, right? But if you didn't have those needs, and if you weren't aware of those needs, and if you weren't attentive to those needs, then you would
Yeah.
never be able to do that, right?
Exactly. So the person who, if you've got back pain and the person who you say, oh, I've got back pain to, starts talking about their back pain, we should probably make excuses for that person that perhaps they've never been in your situation where, I don't know, maybe they've not been in your situation where they've desired that somebody listens to them, and it upset them that they didn't, so they don't know that empathy, so they don't know to treat you how they want to be treated. So we should even make excuses for people who appear to be selfish, just like we would make excuses for children, who we just assume that they're children and they don't know any better. That might be the same with adults too, because everybody's got a different intellectual capacity, everybody's got a different background, their circumstances, their experiences. So it's easy to judge the situation as they should know better, but actually they might not. They might have a good reason not to. And what else was I? And I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten now. But that's fine. Yeah. So.
It's interesting. It's so easy, I say kind of as a religious person, it's very easy to kind of get yourself into a position of thinking, that everybody should be selfless. And and it's you don't want to impose selflessness on other people. I I I worked at a I always tell these silly stories. I worked at a homeless shelter, and we served food. And there was somebody who was like super religious and was saying, oh, we should serve very simple food, simple, nutritious food,
Mhm.
the basics and whatever else. And um, and I remember at the time we had a discussion about this, and we decided, no, actually, we should serve really nice food and something that people really want to eat. It says,
Mhm.
because we don't expect them to be ascetics, right? We're expecting them that, they don't get to eat a lot, right? And so that they have a need, they have a need to enjoy their food. And, saying that, we should somehow impose on them some sort of spiritual selflessness, they shouldn't, they should they should be eating, to live and not living to eat,
Mhm.
whatever we want to say. Says, no, we don't, you don't
Mhm.
put that on the person because their experience is different, right? If
Mhm.
if you lived on the street and you only got one good meal
Mhm.
a week, you would want it to be a really good meal, right?
That's true.
You'd
Mhm.
want it to be really delicious and something which is, and have a donut, like,
Mhm.
and have something special with it.
Exactly. And also, if we should probably ask ourselves at every moment in time, like as much as we possibly can, um, to put ourselves in that situation and think, what would I want? And not just what would I do I need, but what do I want? And what do I give myself? What do I allow myself to have in that situation? Would I allow myself to have, and treat other people how we want to be treated? So like if we eat donuts, then why shouldn't we give a donut to
Right.
somebody who's hungry? It's, if they want, we can assume that they probably like donuts too.
Yes.
So if we feed our own family with good portions of food, with different variety of vegetables and meat, then we should probably assume that other people, we shouldn't give them a portion that's a smaller size or less variety. It's only justice that we do that, the same thing to somebody else, really. And it's okay to want, and that can come from selfishness, obviously, but it's okay to want. Like, imagine if everybody was just, what would be the joy? Where would the joy and the delight be in living if we weren't allowed to want anything?
Yeah.
It would just be a little bit, No, we should
Yeah.
always be grateful and obviously take joy in everything we need and be grateful for everything we need. But what the reason why people smile is because, and they get to a point um where they can really experience the mercy of their creator, and and that's because he gives us beyond just our basic needs, majority of the time. um Not always, and obviously some people don't, they really struggle to even have their basic needs.
Right.
But I think that comes from our injustice, because we have the responsibility to make sure that everybody has their basic needs, but there is beyond that, there's room for beyond just our basic needs for everybody. So
I like what you said, like, what would life be like? I mean, it is, the juice of life, the juice of life is to some extent, our wanting. It could be a source of great pain, but it's also the source of our pleasure. It's also the source of our being able to enjoy the world and to be able, and to be able to get benefit from the world that God gave us. Um,
as long as we're grateful, and as long as we allow others room to want, and we make space for others to be able to want, and to help give them what they want to. And obviously, like, if we're in a situation where we can choose between our want and somebody else's want, let's say if two people both have their needs, and then one wants something and the other wants something else, the same thing, and there's only one, then the selfish person might say, well, I want it for me, and the selfless person might say, well, actually, I'll sacrifice what I want in order to allow you to have that. I would say, if I obviously, I'm not putting selfishness and selflessness at the same level in terms of, what's better. I would always say that it's better to sacrifice what you want in order to enable somebody else to have what they want, if you were in that position where you had to choose. Um, because my understanding is that that brings more pleasure to our creator, because it's like choosing light over darkness, or choosing good over evil, and it allows us to express our love for each other, and it actually brings peace and unity, and it's justice, because you're treating someone else how you would want to be treated. So yeah. But let's say if two people they don't have even what they need, or let's say if one person has what they need and the other person doesn't have what they need, should the one who has what they need give what they have, and maybe even risk dying, in order to enable the other person to have their basic need? That's a question that I'm putting over to you.
well,
Should one be so selfless that
oh
they
no.
sacrifice their life for another?
So you should know this question actually comes up in the Talmud. It's exactly this question. So it says there are two guys in the desert. Okay, two guys in the desert, and they only have one canteen of water. Okay, one of the guys has one canteen of water. Now they know that if one person drinks the entire canteen of water, he is likely to survive. If if both people drink half the canteen of water, they're both likely not to survive. So the question is, what do you do? So the answer the Talmud gives is that the person who has the canteen should drink all of the water and ensure his survival, so
Mhm.
that at least somebody survives, right? So that at least somebody survives. Then you say, well, what about if I want to give it to the other person? So the answer to that is, who's to say that the other person's life is worth more than your life? You were entrusted
Mhm.
with your life, right? You were
Mhm.
entrusted with your life, and this is a chance to save your life. You should save your life. Now, in practical terms, whether somebody would actually do that, like under, like if it were your child, if it were, would you
Mhm.
actually do that? I think I probably wouldn't do that, right? I would give it to my child and let them survive. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I think
Mm. And
I
also, we should probably take other things into consideration. Like, let's say if the other person has three children, that the three children depend, or like, few children that depend on them, and the other one doesn't, then
right,
should that the one who is holding the water not give it to the other? Because
right,
actually, then they're choosing to live, but in place of them living, four other people will die.
right. So I mean, those are really difficult
Mhm.
situations, really, really difficult situations. Um, and you know,
It's really interesting, isn't it?
yeah.
It is hard. It's a
At what point
hard.
should you be selfless? Which point selfless? I think what I got out of today. So
Mhm.
what first I got a few things from today. So one thing I got from today is
Mhm.
I got that that's not so simple. That in order to be selfless, you need to have a certain degree of selfishness. Second, um that it's not always clear where the line is between selfishness
Mhm.
and selflessness. It's not a clear demarcation.
Mhm.
And also that we can't really know if part of our job in the world is taking care of each other, which I think
Mhm.
um it would be difficult to know how to take care of somebody else if we don't think about taking care of ourselves. If we're
Mhm.
if
Exactly.
we had no
Mhm.
concern for taking care of ourselves, we wouldn't know how to take care of others, and so that wouldn't be a good thing. So I think we've done a very good. You've heard it here first, here on Universal God Message of Peace. You heard first that selfishness can be good. Selfishness good, and you heard it here first. Maybe it's never been said before, but now you've heard it, and I think we did a good job. And so I wish everybody a beautiful week, and you should have a week of great peace and happiness, and we'll see you soon.
Amen. Thank you. Shalom. Nice to see you. And peace and blessings be with everyone watching today. Thank you. Please share, like, and subscribe.
Share, like,
Bye.
subscribe.